Hey, Derek here, and I'm in lovely Canberra at the university campus where I'm here for the Open FISCA conference. But that's what I'm here to talk about today. Today is the post-game show for last week's Government Innovation Week that the Public Sector Network put on. And I've had sort of a week to sort of really sit with and reflect on the conference. One thing that was quite interesting for me was that how prominent AI was at this conference. AI is a key theme in everything these days, but I think of all the different conferences and gatherings I've been to, this is the one where AI featured the most prominently in it, and it was the central theme through all of it. Ross in the pregame talked about Danny Pearson being the minister to sort of launch this, and he did a really good job. And he talked about this concept of there being a race around AI, that everybody is rushing to adopt AI as effectively and as quickly as possible. And Australia is also in this race, that this is really important for them as a country, as a state, to have that competitive advantage around AI. But he drew this distinction, sort of a middle path, where, you know, on the one side you have the US, which is just let it rip. No guardrails, let's go as fast as possible. And then the other side, you have Europe, which is sort of let's put in a box, let's be very cautious about it. And he wanted to carve out this sort of middle path where, yes, we are going to really lean into AI, but we're going to do it cautiously and carefully. Well, intelligently, I think, is the key thing. And he talked about this concept of social license, that the government needs to get the public on board and invested in supporting how AI is being adopted by government and by society at large. Though, if I'm honest, I felt like by the end of the conference, I felt that Australia was more closer to the let it rip side of things than to put it in a box. So that was kind of really interesting. The other thing that came up in the beginning was this whole idea of data centers, which is something I haven't actually heard that much about. But data centers, very important infrastructure required for AI. And this is something that the state of Victoria really sees themselves as heading a competitive advantage with, because they've got easy access to water, cheap energy, and they really want to lean in and become sort of like a data center capital for the region, which was interesting just to see that as a focus as well. I mentioned in an earlier video an article by my friend Jan Duran where he talks about innovation in three different ways: in innovation and transformation. Optimization is about doing things better, innovation is about doing new things, and transformation is about shifting the whole entire system. And within the context of this conference, AI was very much talked about within the optimization focus. It was all about how do we improve government's efficiency and effectiveness, do more with less. How can AI really take over a lot of the back office roles to free people up? It was really the central focus around it. There really wasn't too much conversation around doing new things or even transformation. But this makes sense in some ways, because the other thing that became clear is that at least a lot of people feel that the government's in sort of the early stages of AI adoption, still building up the literacy, the confidence, and really understanding how do we use this as government. So that was interesting to see. My favorite talk at the conference was really the first day. It was by a guy named Neville Pinto. And he, I think, had a really compelling case that he made that AI is, you know, this new sort of sexy tool that everybody's excited about. But the important thing is to realize that AI sits on infrastructure, and that even though most of the conversations about, you know, these flashy new applications, the infrastructure underneath that government still has to work with is legacy tech, is messy data that hasn't been cleaned, hasn't been organized, is missing metadata. And that is going to become a huge challenge. But I think one of the things that he said that really stuck with me, and I think is going to be important, is this recognition that AI is increasing the interconnectivity of government. You know, government has been incredibly siloed and fractured, and AI is forcing an integration to happen. And with that increased integration is increased complexity. More things are connected than they were before. The challenge, of course, with that is, with that increased complexity, because it's AI, there's a obscuring that's happening. There's a loss of visibility. AI is a black box, and the outcome of that is decreased knowledge of the potential outcomes of things that happen. Because of the increased complexity and decreased visibility, there's going to be a lot more unexpected consequences that are going to come out of actions. So yes, we're going to be able to do way more than we ever could before, but we're also going to have less line of sight on some of the downstream second, third order outcomes of what we're doing, which I thought was a really fascinating way to talk about this. And so his biggest thing that he was really championing was this idea of simplicity. Look, we need to simplify things before we make them more complex. How do we simplify our data architecture? How do we simplify the way we do things so that as AI, it serves as a counterforce to the increased complexity that AI is going to provide? One of the conversations that's really starting to build is this idea of AI agents. It's a recognition that Agentic AI is here, that agents are going to become the norm in terms of how people interact with AI and each other. And what does this mean for government? And this is where the cybersecurity piece was really helpful. So there's a whole cybersecurity day that was part of this Government Innovation Week. There's a real recognition that AI agents poses a huge opportunity, obviously, massive opportunity in terms of what can be done, but also opens up a whole new plane of security risk. How do you work when you've got more and more people who are more and more AI agents walking around? What does this mean? What does this look like? Is it AI? So the AI agents opens up like a whole new world around security risk, because now you have autonomous bots making decisions on their own without necessarily a clear line of sight. This is a massive security risk, but it's also a huge opportunity. So you can't put the genie back in the bottle on this. AI agents are coming. And so there's this real question about how do we build our security knowing that AI agents are a thing? How do we manage the knowledge and the information that feeds into those AI agents that shapes how they make decisions? How do we keep people in the loop? And what does that mean? I mean, keeping people in the loop has become this big theme, and I'll be honest, I'm somewhat skeptical, because it's almost like, okay, it's okay, there's a person in the loop, we're fine. No, just because a person's in the loop doesn't mean that they're qualified or capable of managing the decisions that AI are making now. And I think we are using it as sort of a blanket that when it really shouldn't be. So I'd love to see more deep conversations around the humans in the loop piece with that as well. But yeah, AI agents, brand new risk, opens up a whole new sort of question. One of the questions I had coming into this conference was, how would this compare to the same conferences happening in Canada? So I went to one in British Columbia, I went to one in Ottawa, and then obviously here we're in a completely different country. I think obviously AI has been a theme across both. It did feel like it was more central here. The Agentic AI piece was also more prominent. This could literally be because, I mean, the world's moving so fast. It is a month later. This is a bigger deal now. But the Agentic AI piece I thought was interesting. I do feel that Australia is a bit more bullish on AI than Canada seems to be. But again, the theme is the same, of governments rapidly trying to figure out how to adopt this to improve their efficiency and their effectiveness. What still hasn't really happened yet is a deeper conversation about how AI is going to transform how government itself functions. And these are conversations, the transformation stuff is conversations that are happening. Like I met with Chris Fechner from DTA this morning, and that's very much more where his mind is at. But in the conference, which I don't think, these conferences aren't necessarily the sharp edge of the wedge. They're kind of a couple steps back. It's sort of the first majority, if you will, when it comes to transformation. The other thing, I was thinking, like, what is going to matter from this event in a month, a year from now? And I think one of the big themes that I think is really going to become more and more important was one of the speakers talked about how we're moving from sort of an information age, a data age, where it's all about having as much information as possible, to an intelligence age, where we have AI actively helping shape how we make sense of that data. We have an information overload, and our solution to that is to build these tools that sift through and simplify the information into things that we can do with that information. That's what intelligence is. But the challenge, of course, with that is it opens up all sorts of risks around biases around this type of stuff. So I'm really interested, as we move into an age where it's all about intelligence, that is going to allow us to make quicker, better decisions, but it opens up a lot of risk as well. So we haven't figured out what the intelligence age, which is just starting, is going to look like and what it's going to mean for government and for society. And so I could just see the starting kernels of that conversation here. Anyways, really interesting set of conversations. I'm still chewing on what came out of the week. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how to contrast what the conversations were like last week in Melbourne with what the conversations are like today here in Canberra at the Open Fisk event. It is a very different audience, so it'll be interesting. So maybe I'll do a video that sort of compares and contrasts that. But other than that, a huge thank you to the Public Sector Network, who is supporting me and brought me in to be part of this event with them. Excited to go to another one.